Hello, and how are you? Good. This is Keith, and if you don't know me, I'm here to help you build your speaking skills and confidence for the IELTS Speaking Test. Today, you have a great opportunity to listen to a native speaker, Jamie Keddie, doing the IELTS Speaking Test. And there's some very good reasons why you should listen. Number one, most of this is audio, so you really have to train your ear and focus. Number two, Jamie is Scottish, so it's a different accent. You know, for IELTS, you must listen to lots of different accents. Jamie, he's an experienced teacher trainer. He's a published author for Oxford University Press, and he's, most importantly, a storyteller. So a lot of his work is around how he tells stories, and you should listen to how he does that in part 2. It's really good. And finally, because, well, the examiner's me, what more do you want? Let's get straight into it. Right, hi, Jamie. Nice to see you. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Keith, how are you doing?
I'm pretty good, thanks. I'm doing very well. Now, listen, it was really nice to see you here, and thank you very much for coming to join us and do this nerve-wracking IELTS test thing.
It is a bit nerve-wracking, isn't it? I mean, what if I fail? Everything I've worked for
falls apart. So yes. Absolutely. So no pressure, right? Yeah.
No pressure.
So it's great. So just for the listeners, I mean, obviously I know you from our teacher training world and the work that you do, but maybe just tell people a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Well, I've been teaching for quite a long time, since 2001, I think. So that's about 18 years. Actually, more recently, I'm a teacher trainer. I'm a writer. I've written 2 books for Oxford University Press, and I call myself a storyteller. The reason is I suppose that's what I do, and that's what I consider myself to be, as a storyteller. One of my interests is how to teach, how to learn through story and storytelling. So when I give conferences for teachers, and I do this quite a lot, and this is usually what I talk about: storytelling, teacher-led storytelling, using story as a source of language, because stories are texts, and importantly, getting stories from students. And so that's one of my key interests, I would say.
Yeah, fantastic. And I remember the conference that you did in Malaysia where we met, and I think you were referencing videos and YouTube videos as well in stories, which was really interesting.
Well, that's where it came from, really, I suppose, is visual materials, images, videos. And I mean, I think teachers and students, we love video in the classroom. And I think the reason we do is it's a never-ending source of narratives. Videos from YouTube are kind of bite-sized stories that we can use. And I think that's what attracts us to video, is the story that it has to offer. Yeah. So it's been a natural progression from there, I would say.
Fantastic. Well, listen, we'll talk a little bit more about that, and maybe some learning tips for students at the end of the test, because there's no getting out of it. The test is coming. So do you know, I mean, you know a little bit about IELTS. How familiar are you with the test?
I'm less familiar now than I used to be. I used to be quite familiar with it in a few years ago when I worked with a few students. So in their preparation, but I suspect that things have changed since then. So I'll wait for you to guide me.
Okay, fantastic. Well, listen, there are basically 3 parts. Part 2 is where you'll have a minute to prepare and then speak. So I don't know if you have a pencil or paper. You may not need it, but you can see how you go. And I'll just go through like a normal IELTS test,
Sure.
Timing it as well. Right. So let's kick off. So I'm going to turn on my clock. Right. So this is the IELTS speaking test taking place online today, and the examiner is Keith O'Hare, and the candidate is Jamie Keddie. So, hello. Can you tell me your full name, please?
Full name is Jamie Richard Keddie, but if we're to go by my passport, it would be James Richard Keddie.
Right. And what shall I call you?
Jamie.
Jamie, right. Great. So in the first part of this test, Jamie, I'm going to ask you some questions about yourself. Let's talk about your hometown first. Tell me about your hometown.
Well, hometown, I suppose my hometown would be the town I grew up in back in Scotland. I now live in Barcelona. So in one way, in some respects, Barcelona is my hometown now, but I suspect that you're asking about my hometown back in Scotland, which is actually more of a village than a town. It's a very small place. In fact, by chance, when I was there last time, I happened to check Wikipedia because I was with a friend, and its population is 1,750. In fact, 1,751. I wouldn't usually have that information at my fingertips.
Right.
But it's a very small.
Is it a good place for children?
I would say that it is a good place for children, although I don't have any. I used to be one myself. There was a time when I was a child, and I remember having. I remember enjoying growing up in this village, and yes, most of the attraction was, I suppose, other children and places to go and play and have fun. There was a park, and we played football. And it was nice and it was safe.
Right.
And that's why I remember.
Great. Let's move on now. I'm going to talk about concentration. What helps you concentrate?
Well, it's a good question because it's incredibly difficult, isn't it? I am so easily distracted. And if I'm writing, for example, and I'm trying to concentrate and I'm trying to find my flow, what I have to do is to set a stopwatch. And I have to time that and see how far I can get without any distractions. And occasionally I'll check the stopwatch, and if I can get to 10 minutes without any stopping, I'll be very happy. And if I ever do stop for anything at all, even if it's just to check Facebook or to go and get a cup of coffee, I have to stop the stopwatch. And I find that really helps.
So what stops you from concentrating?
Mobile phones in front of me, having the fact that we work in computers, which laptops, which has instant access to YouTube and Facebook, right there. This is the difficult thing, isn't it? That's hard.
Let's move on and let's talk about wearing jeans. Do you like wearing jeans?
You know what? It's funny. I would say that I do. I do enjoy wearing jeans. And the reason I know that is if I'm ever working and I have to wear smart trousers, there's nothing quite like changing into your jeans after work. It just feels good, doesn't it? It's that change of it's a mindset, isn't it? And so, yes, I love wearing jeans.
Why do you think jeans are so popular?
Oh, why are jeans so popular? Because they're hard wearing. I think you can, it's one of the good reasons. I think they just look good. You can wear them with anything virtually, can't you? You can wear them, you can take the smart casual look. You can go totally casual if you prefer jeans and a t-shirt. Or you can just, wear it with a shirt and a jacket and smart shoes. They're just so adaptable and so versatile. And I think we've made a good choice in adopting jeans as our standard trouser.
Great. Great. Okay. I'm going to move on now. I'm going to move on to part 2, and I'm going to give you here a topic to talk about for 1 to 2 minutes. You've got a minute to prepare, and obviously you can make notes if you like. I'm going to put the topic in the chat here.
Yes. Shall I read it to you?
So I'll read it to you. That's my job. So I want you to describe someone you know who spends their free time helping others. So you've got 1 minute to think about that and get ready. Fantastic. Okay, remember you've got 1 to 2 minutes. Don't worry if I stop you. I'll tell you when the time is up. When you're ready, you can start speaking, Jamie.
Well, it's a good friend of mine called Nick Bilborough. I've known Nick for probably about 15 years. He works in the same profession. He's also a teacher, trainer, writer. And I know Nick from being involved in the same world, but I think I got to know him really well about 8 years ago when we went on a trip together to the West Bank in Palestine. And we were working with teachers there, taking part in some conferences and giving workshops. And this was a very special time for Nick because he was very touched by the life of Palestinian teachers and their students and the hardships that they face. And he went on to set up what's now come to be known as the Hands Up Project, which is actually a registered charity it now is. And what he does, and it's not just, it's as well as his free time and his work time, it's a huge amount of time that he spends, is setting up volunteers who are willing to work with students in Gaza and the West Bank on storytelling and drama projects. And this has been going, as I said, for a few years now, this organisation, and he's been doing fantastic things. And I spoke to him just the other day, and he said, it's funny, Jamie, but it seems like only yesterday I started this project, but there are children involved in the Hands Up project who, for them, it's been most of their childhood, which is quite an incredible thought for me. That's the difference between time passing by as an adult and time passing by as a child, I suppose. So that's my person, Nick, who's a good egg, who does a lot to help others in his spare time.
I'll stop you there. Thank you very much. Great. Okay. Great. So we're going to move on now because we've been talking there about somebody who spends their time helping others. So I'm going to ask some questions related to that. Do you think it's important for people to do volunteer work?
I think it's important for people to do volunteer if that's what they feel that they should do. I think it's a very personal thing. People are driven by all sorts of different things in life. And so it's a personal thing, I would say, very much so.
Mm. And what kind of personality is important for people who do volunteer work?
I think you have to be an incredibly empathetic person. You have to be somebody who's moved by the plight of others, somebody who spends a lot of time thinking about the welfare of other people and putting themselves into other people's shoes, and really takes on other people's problems and makes them almost their own problems. And that's what drives them to want to help, perhaps.
Right. And can people be trained to help others?
Can people be trained? Yes, absolutely. I'm sure they can be, because I think when you first start off, when you want to help somebody, in fact, it can be very difficult to know exactly what to do. We make all sorts of assumptions. I have a friend who's disabled. He's a wheelchair user. He has mobility disability, and he tells me stories about people who think they're helping him, but in fact are not helping him. They're hindering him. And I think people need to be trained to know how to interact, firstly with people, and secondly what they actually really need. Which, rather than moving away from assumptions and getting down to the core.
Right.
Yeah.
Great. Let's talk about charities. Do charities play an important role in the economy?
Do charities play an important role in the economy? I would guess that they must do. I mean, charities, for example, they employ people. Charities involve buying. Charities involve selling. All of these transactions, movement of people, movement of money, movement of goods, are always a key part of any economy. So I would say absolutely yes.
And would you say that fundraising for charities is hard or difficult?
I would say it's incredibly difficult. Little I know about it. There's just so many people, especially these days, with their own missions, trying to raise money, trying to be noticed, trying to push a cause. And because there's so many people doing it right now, it makes it more difficult than ever to get noticed. So yes.
Right. Do you think that the government should help charities to raise funds?
Well, this is often a key question, whether the government should actually help charities or whether government should take measures so that whatever cause it is we're dealing with should be addressed in a more at the level of government. So I would say that's a more key question: is the cause, is the concern, rather than it being a charity, is it something that we should be taken care of at the government level?
Right. That's it, Jamie. That's the end of the speaking test.
How did I do, Keith?
Very interesting, right? I thought it was really interesting. You did very, very well from a language perspective. Obviously, fluency was great. Some really interesting language and vocabulary coming up, like, hindering being aware of the plight of people. There was lots of really good language. What was interesting for me was that it felt a bit like speaking to you over a pint in the pub, that we were just having a conversation and talking. And so at times, some parts of the test, you speak a lot more than a candidate normally would. And at other parts, you maybe speak a bit less than a candidate would. And it's always difficult getting that balance. But I think what I like is the fact that the kind of the natural language and relaxed conversation is such a great way of doing the IELTS test, and that came across very well. How did you feel?
I was wondering about my answers to your questions in parts 1 and parts 3, because I became aware that I wasn't sure how concise they should be. Maybe I should have given you a much more wrapped up, concise answer. I think maybe I wasn't quite doing that.
I would agree. For part 1, if you were my student, I would say make your answers much more concise in part 1. They were a bit long-winded, and you sometimes do that thing where you, in mid-sentence, you start talking about something else and then come back to it. So that in part 1. But in part 3, you were right on the money. I mean, you were spot on. I think just the right length. You were concise, succinct. Earlier, before we started the test, you were talking a little bit about storytelling, and we were talking about part 2. How did you feel? I felt you were telling a bit of a story there about your mate Nick, in a way. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, I think in part 2, it's easy to kind of maybe answer those questions, but in a slightly sterile or a slightly dry way. And from what I understand, or the way I've always approached this with my own students, is that it can be great to find a personal experience and to tell a story or to share an anecdote, if you prefer. So this was really how I was approaching it. The question 2 could be, another example, one I saw quite recently was tell a story about a present that you gave somebody. Why did you choose it? How did that person react when they got it? And that could actually be a bit dull, couldn't it? It could be a bit boring. So I think the challenge for the candidate is actually to kind of go through your experience bank, and try to find something which can be told as an anecdote, which I tried to do in this example when I described my trip to Palestine with Nick, but he was touched by the people he met and the situations that he came across, how it drove him to then set up this charity, and what he now does, and this little conversation I had with him the other day. And as somebody who works with story, this is something I train teachers and students to do is to become aware of your stories, to collect your stories, to give them form, to practice them, and possibly most important of all, to practice them. If you've told your story in your own language several times, what's it going to sound like when you tell it in English? And you will find that if you do that and you prepare it, it will take you to places that you may have never been before with your English, with regards to your English, that is. So that would be a tip of mine, especially for part 2 of the speaking, is to identify an anecdote and tell it in 2 minutes.
That's nice. That's great. And your anecdote actually fitted in the 2 minutes just right. It was just the right length. It was good.
I had my stopwatch there. I was timing myself with my
good practice. That is a good idea. So,
part 1.
Jamie, do you have any other learning tips? I mean, for students who are learning English, what would your kind of top tip be for them if they're learning and studying?
Well, yeah, if you're learning English, I think when we're learning language, it's very easy to sort of break things down into a list of vocabulary in one hand or a set of grammar rules on the other hand. And I think it's nice to marry them, bring them together. And so when you're taking notes in English, to make notes of full sentences or phrases that you've come across. For example, think something I said today that you liked, Keith, if I'm not mistaken, was that Nick became aware of the plight.
Yeah.
What did I say exactly? Do you remember?
He became aware of the plight of the Palestinian people, or something like that.
Something like that. We don't know exactly what it was, but we could, whatever it was, you could just write plight and then translate it to mean struggle, and that would be taking the vocabulary list approach. But I would say if you can capture the phrase or the sentence, the plight of the Palestinian people, you've got something which is so much more meaningful. It's got a stronger narrative. You're much more likely to remember the time and the place when you met it, the context, if you like. And also the fact that you've got this one word surrounded by other words gives you information about it as a grammar. And so this is ticking so many boxes to see language as being something which is much more complete than just either individual words which are cemented together by grammar. So capture phrases, write them down, translate them into your own language. If you have to write a note about who said it, where you saw it, and collect those. And it's so much easier to refer to those to develop your language, to develop your English, I think.
Oh, I love that. That is brilliant. Really, really nice. That is a great tip. And I guess finally as well, having you here as a teacher trainer, because I know some of the students are actually also teachers or preparing to be teachers. Would you give a tip for teachers as well as they're teaching English?
Yes. I would say that one of the most important things to develop as a teacher is your voice, the teacher talk, let's say. I think teacher talk is very, very badly understood, very poorly represented. We see it as something which a lot of teachers in a lot of parts of the world see it as something which is almost bad, something which has to be pushed to the side. The teacher is not the one to talk. It's the students that have got to talk. And there's a certain amount of truth to that. I think for any teacher, being able to keep your voice and your teacher talk down to a minimum is an essential skill. But I think that as you progress through your career, you very much come to realize that teacher talk is essential. It's essential as a source of input. It's essential for asking questions. It's essential for giving instructions, for clarifying, for defining, for explaining, for interacting with your students, for making small talk with them. And it's not just about voice, it's about listening as well. It's about ears. And I think it's essential to work with your teacher talk so that you can interact with your students as best as you can. And my personal way of doing this, and I always say to teachers that one of the best things you can do is to embrace storytelling. It's a very pure form of communication, and try a few little stories, anecdotes with your own students in the classroom. Prepare them. Don't make them too long. Short can be good. It's a short text, and it's a really good way for teachers to develop is through storytelling, I think.
Wow, fantastic. That's great. That's really good. I'd forgotten all about teacher talk, and that is a really nice reminder for me as well. I like it. Brilliant. Excellent. Well, listen, Jamie, thank you very much for coming along today and doing the IELTS test. If people want to find out more about you or even get in touch with you, is there any way they can find your work or be in contact?
Absolutely. I mean, my website is lessonstream.com, and you can get in contact with me then, and you can find out more about my stuff there. And I'll be soon starting my podcast. So I'd be honoured if you'd like to subscribe to that.
Brilliant. Is your podcast going to be around storytelling, I guess?
My podcast is all going to be around story and storytelling in the classroom. So absolutely, yes, all things story and storytelling.
Fantastic. That sounds great. I love podcasts. Brilliant. That's great. Well, listen, Jamie, thank you very much. It's been great having you on the, I was going to say on the show. It's not a show, is it? On the video.
So, Keith, you're a bit of a showman, so yes.
Yeah,
it's been a
little bit. Thank you very much, and we'll stay in touch.
We will do. Thanks very much for giving me this opportunity. It's been fun, Keith, and one day we can do it again, I hope.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Guys, thanks for watching. If you want to see the full analysis, follow the link to the show notes and to my website. You can learn all of the language Jamie is using. If you enjoyed it, please share this, subscribe, tell your friends about IELTS speaking success. And I look forward to seeing you soon. Take care now. Bye-bye.